and I record both those sessions and put them up on YouTube, listed, with the date and part one, part two. Now, I will put those links to those individual YouTubes up on the As You Learn site. They won't go up immediately after we finish because Zoom is not real good about processing out the video files. And so it generally takes them a while to crank through that, and it may be an hour before I get the downloads ready to go. But sometime the evening after we do a session, the videos will go up. I don't know at this point exactly what the schedule of synchronous meetings will be on Zoom. I know we'll meet this week, we'll meet next week, and then we'll see. By then I should have my all the things that are going on this semester with academics and other things kind of sorted out on a calendar so that I can have, I'll know what evenings would be safe to book those. I tend not to want to meet every week because I think that's counterproductive. A lot of learning any sort of new set of ideas or new process or whatever is, sort of discovery and ownership. And so it's a lot of the stuff that we'll be doing in here, you will be doing, in between class sessions or maybe at times when we won't do a synchronous class session. And so we'll kind of sort through all that. It'll make a little bit more sense once we kind of do this introductory thing as to what that means. A little bit about me, and I appreciate your thoughts about my what's going on with my family, but I do that simply because I think it's important that people in a class know that if there's a ongoing distraction that might come into play every now and then, at least why it's there. It looks pretty good. He's finished his last biopsies this afternoon. Actually, my wife is with him up in Baltimore, and so it's, from everything we can tell, it's highly treatable. It's very early. It's one of those things that's extremely rare. One of the docs has been doing cancer surgery, on the head and the eyes and things like that for 25 years, and he's seen 2 other cases. So, they're very interested at it. It's at Johns Hopkins, being a research hospital. So he's getting very good care. He's getting nice, excellent treatment plan. And so everything looks prognosis is very, very good. But, I'm a probability guy, so I understand what probabilities mean. So, I know that I don't share those thoughts with my wife or with my son, but at the same time, I'll just carry that little bit of worry and keep it inside of myself because I understand the nature of probabilities. But so I thank you for your concern. I just wanted people to know that if I do seem from time to time to have some distraction, it's not disinterest or anything like that. It's just that I may have something else that's happened that may be on my mind. But I don't anticipate that occurring. I don't anticipate that it will interrupt class, that it will interrupt class time. My wife is retired, and so she is fully committed to do whatever she needs to do with him and take him where he needs to go and, be with him and all those things. So we've got, that pretty well covered. You think when you have kids that you're, when they hit 18 or 21 or whatever, you can quit taking care of them, quit worrying about them. But, he's 33, and I think you don't really get uh, to stop worrying about your kids until uh, they put you in the ground. I don't think it's really something that you get past as you grow over. And if you have kids, I see one in the picture, as a matter of fact, and so you will understand that as you go along. That kids kind of become your devotion, even when they're grown and he's a lawyer and all this sort of stuff. You still care for them. And so anyhow, hopefully it won't get in the way. I don't think it will, but I just wanted you to know that distraction is there. I'll give you a little bit more about me. I always like people to know who they're dealing with. I am uh, chronologically advanced. In a purely statistical sense, I'm a little bit older than the average. But 70 is not a bad age, and this is my 41st year in higher ed, my 45th year in education, 46th actually in education. I got to get my numbers sequenced every year. You kind of forget what year it is. I spent 30 years as a faculty and administrator and various other functions at James Madison University here in Harrisonburg. So that's why I'm here. That's why my home is here. I spent a couple of years at a community college as a senior administrator in charge of institutional effectiveness and institutional research. And for the last 11 years, I've been at App State teaching mostly research classes, stats classes, research methodologies, working with doc students and whatever else happens to come up. And I have no plan to retire anytime in the immediate future because, as my wife reminds me, I have nothing else to do. And she doesn't want me around if that's all that's going to happen. So I'll be doing this for quite a while. I have developed my PhD is in research and evaluation. And so it's in a field in an area that's not really a content per se area. It's not English or history or math or whatever. It's research and evaluation. And essentially what that means is have spent my academic career dealing with data, dealing with assessment, dealing with statistics, dealing with research methods. I'm a mixed methodologist. I do not only quantitative methods, but qualitative methods. Just so happens that App, the need was to have somebody that could do more quantitative stuff. And I certainly have tried to fill the bill there. I've done some postdoc work in advanced statistical analysis at Stanford. And so, I can hold my own with in the conversation with sort of high-end statisticians, but I prefer not. That's not the area of statistics I'm interested in. I'm interested in application of statistics to people like you. I mean, people that are in a field where data is important and where it's important to understand odds and likelihoods and, all kinds of things that you'll encounter kind of in a regular basis in the healthcare area and even the administration of healthcare. It is a field that is highly quantitative. And so understanding quantitative data becomes a sort of a key part of the process. And that's kind of my mission is I write papers for the high-end stuff so the university stays happy with me and I get to go to nice conferences and do nice presentations and then build a vacation on the backside of it. But, it is my avocation is to help people understand the statistical ideas and some of the basic everyday statistics that everybody can kind of use in what they do. Now, there are some myths that I like to blow up. And the very first one is that statistics is math. It could not be further from math. It is actually a process of logic. And we have, over the last 150 years or so, we have figured out how to use statistical methodologies and statistical logic to answer logical questions about data, logical questions about relationships between different variables, and what is the best way to do something as opposed to just a good way to do things, and things like that that are important answers to have in pretty much any field, but they are primarily logical questions and not mathematical questions. And so although it borrows some mathematical concepts and some mathematical processes, stats is not math, it's logic. And so that's the first myth I want people to realize is a myth. The second one is that statistics is always precise and always gives you a precise answer. And the answer is no, it doesn't. Statistics is a process of understanding, assigning probabilities to certain outcomes. And, those probabilities are never 100%. And so we never know for sure. And there's always potentially another cause. And so, words like prove and cause and effect and, terms like that we tend to think are very precise and very hard-edged words are not really that hard edge in terms of statistical analysis. All we are ever really talking about is probabilities. What's the likelihood of some outcome occurring? And so we'll get into all of that, but those are a couple of the early myths that I kind of like to get out of the way, that, statistics is not as precise as perhaps we'd like to believe, and never really gives us a 100% answer. And it's not math. Now, so what are your sort of perceptions as you walk into an experience that involves statistics?
Well, I did my undergrad. I have a bachelor's in nutrition, as I'm sure a few other classmates have had, but we did take biostats, and that class was interesting. It wasn't necessarily what I expected, but what I appreciated about it was we took common health occurrences, because I think the Zika virus was starting to start to become a bit of an not epidemic, but we were looking at stats in terms of health benefit and how the numbers were growing, and is it quote unquote statistically significant. So I do remember that a bit, but that's about as much background that I have with stats outside of epidemiology, where they do talk about referencing certain aspects of research.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, familiarity is an important part of the sort of the learning process, because it's at the end of this semester. Now, I often teach this thing during the summer, which is crazy, because it's absolutely impossible to do what I would like to be able to do with it in what's effectively an 8-week session. I mean, they say 10 weeks, but it's essentially 8 weeks. And it becomes almost impossible to do that. And so This is the first time I've done this for the College of Health Sciences across a semester. So we'll see how that works as I kind of expand out, the model a little bit more, and we can touch on some things that we really couldn't touch on in terms of trying to do it in 10 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it is. But yeah, it's all these areas where you look at the incident of different outbreaks or different occurrences, or the likelihood of, for example, this evening I was just heard the news a while ago, and the U.S. is about to be stripped, and probably at the end of the month, end of next month will be, of its banner as being zero measles from the World Health Organization. And, so it was kind of like, okay, therefore, a period of time, 10 years, 15 years, whatever, the U.S. had carried this banner, basically this pronouncement from the World Health Organization that the U.S. had eradicated measles. And, suddenly here we are again, and we have measles, and it's tied to political issues, and it's tied to religious issues, and it's tied to, whatever. But it is, as someone who is somewhat of a scientist, in that I started out as an engineering major and then a physics major, and I still stay current in a lot of stuff like that before I ended up over doing what I'm doing. But you know the value of science, but science also has to be functional in a world that has other forces, whether they're political or religious, or and they're not always benevolent. Sometimes they are have other things at play too. And so it is even when you think you have conquered things like measles, and recently we had a mini outbreak of polio. The virus is very similar to the polio virus that we had eradicated. Mother Nature finds a way around, and it's one of the things that is embedded in biostatistics is this concept of survival and decay. And if it ends up being terms and formulas, but it essentially talks about that there are instincts for survival among organisms like viruses and bacterial organisms, and they're not static. They're doing the same thing that everything else on the planet is doing. They're evolving, and the other side of that is decay. That over time, all things fall apart, and my body is an example of that. I'm on my 8th of various surgeries now, so it's kind of like eventually they'll hit something they can't replace, and then it gets problematic. But these notions of decay and these notions of survival are sort of embedded into the whole biostatistical realm in ways that are somewhat subtle, but at the same time they can be pretty obvious. And this notion of probability, because there is never 100%. You're always somewhere less than 100%. And even if it's 99.999, it's not there. And there's always that 1% that can sneak through the door, that 1/1000% that can sneak through the door. And so you have to realize that we never really know what we think we know, but we can use statistical techniques and analysis techniques to know more, and hopefully make better decisions, and as we go forward, maybe figure out what some of those things are. But yeah, it's Some of it's terminology, some of it's just understanding a few concepts. Actually, the field of statistics, the realm of statistics has an amazingly few basic concepts. There's only a couple of three. And the whole field of statistics is built around those two or three ideas. And so once you kind of master those things, it becomes a little bit easier to understand what you know from data and what you learn from data and things like that. And so what we'll do very early here is we'll talk a little bit today and quite a bit more next week about those key things. What are those two or three things, and what do they mean, and how do they play themselves out in terms of thinking about how we understand relationships or comparisons between different groups or different variables or different bits and pieces of information. And so I tell people that if it weren't incredibly simple, they wouldn't let me teach it. But I guess somebody has to do it. So, I guess I'm stuck with that for the last 40 years and maybe the next 10 or 15 forward. Other thoughts about just the statistics in general before we kind of, talk about the syllabus a little bit and talk about, I'll try to get to know you a little bit better as we go along. I'm not a big one on going around the room and introducing and all that sort of stuff. I'm assuming most of you know most of everyone else, or you'll get to know everyone else as we go along. Unless somebody wants us to do that, and then I'm perfectly fine with it. I just kind of like to move along. All right. Well, let's look at let's look at the syllabus just real quickly, because there's the things are in there, the things that have to be in there, and so we'll kind of hit the high spots real quickly, because it's not it's not like it's the end all be all of the course. Let me see if I can get the share button to work on the Zoom. Okay. Hopefully you can see the share. You never know when you get to fall semester around here, because they've installed a new version of Zoom. They've installed a new version of As You Learn. They've installed a new video process. And so you just kind of have to click and hope that it all works the first 25 times you use it, because sometimes it doesn't. But if it's shared up, then we're okay. The course description is Statistics for Health Administration. This is essentially the same course that I've taught for the Masters in Healthcare Management. And they asked me to if I would be willing to deliver the course to a cohort of folks from nutrition and maybe some nursing folks and things like that for the fall. And I said, sure. How do you want it? Do you want me to approach it in a different way? And they said, no. Let's just go with the course we got. We like what you're doing for the healthcare management folks, so let's keep that one. And if we go forward with this in the future and offer this in the falls or something like that, then we'll maybe take a look. But right now, let's keep it the way it was. So this is essentially the course that I developed 4 years ago, I guess, for healthcare management. It's in the area of healthcare management. It's highly data driven, and it's a field that uses what we now call data analytics. We used to call it analysis of large data sets, but that's terminology. Everybody liked the business terminology of data analytics, and it kind of undergirds the whole decision process that takes place in data care and health management and the whole medical field. Everything is very data driven. It's there is always a component of it that's not science, that's not data driven, that the sort of the human side of things. But it is heavily data driven, and as I'm sure you're aware, being in the around the healthcare field and all that, there's an immense amount of data that's kept, and there's an immense record keeping process that goes on, and so every interaction that a healthcare site has, whether it's a hospital or a nursing home or a clinic or outpatient or whatever, public health, every interaction that's had with patients or clients or individuals is recorded and managed. The data is managed, and we always know why, who did what, when, where, and so you're sort of awash with data. And being awash with data, there is a need to make some sense out of it and to try to figure out how it all comes together to offer some assistance in making decisions. And so there are ways in which we can talk about statistics that may help to be able to do that. Now, the course objectives, this is kind of a standard set of objectives that I would build for almost any stats course, with some obviously specialization toward healthcare, and we will embed most of these things throughout the course. The course will be driven by using a piece of software, which we'll talk about in a little bit, to begin to understand data and to analyze data using statistical techniques to be able to answer questions. You've got my information there. I'm cell phone. Yeah, if you need that, email is the best way to reach me. If you want to talk or meet or whatever, we'll generally do that in Zoom. Or if you want to do an old-fashioned phone call, I have phones, and I'm more than willing to do that too. But in this modern world, we might as well use the tools we have. So Zoom works pretty well for me. But if you're on the road or something, and you have a question, or you need to talk, or you're going to be on the road, then we'll just do a good old-fashioned phone call. I most likely will not be in Boone, much of any, and you won't be either, probably. So I don't know that matters all that much. I do have an office. I keep trying to sublet it, but the dean keeps telling me I can't do that. And eventually they'll take it away from me. But I'm just not there, because almost all of my instruction, all of my teaching is online, and all my work with doc students is pretty much through Zoom or online, except for defenses and things like that. I have 3 courses, 2 other graduate courses this fall, along with this course. And I have 3 dissertations I'm chairing that have to be finished this year. And one of them has to be finished in October. So, I have, he's kind of on my speed dial thing, because he calls me about once every other day. But we'll get him through. And I have 2 others, and then I'm on a few more committees. So, those are additional dates that I'm trying to get pinned down, so that, I know that it won't conflict with, a class meeting time or something like that. All the necessary text material will be online. I'll provide you with some, there's a couple of very good stats texts that are online. that were developed through grants from the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health. And so they're done by top-notch people, and they're very, very clear, very concise, not overly technical. And so I kind of like to use those things as opposed to giving you something else to put on your bookshelf. In general, classes are operated under the policies, academic policies and procedures by App State, and there's a link there that you can go and look at those and see what those are. Participation is important, and that doesn't necessarily mean that anytime we're going to do a synchronous meeting that you need to be at all of them every time. I think it will benefit you if you are at the ones that we have. There are certain things about looking at the recordings and things like that, you just may not get what you need to get. I'm a very much believer in active learning and discovery learning and mastery learning. I think the only thing that you learn anything, the only way in which you learn anything is by doing, and typically by repetition. There's a fair amount of brain science behind this, cognitive science behind this, in terms of this whole novice to expert thing and this whole notion of different types of memory and the way in which you move from sort of your conscious memory, which is very, very slow and cumbersome, to your subconscious memory, which is quite efficient, although sometimes unorganized. And the way that you move between those two and move to the more efficient side of your memory is through repetition and discovery and practice. And I used to coach. Prior to higher ed, I taught high school and middle school for a little while, and I coached basketball and football and a few things like that. And when you're looking at that type of psychomotor development, you really see that repetition thing kick in. Because if you're not into athletics or, run screaming from the room anytime a basketball or football game comes on. But, if you are an athlete, or even if you're a musician, or if you're a singer, or if you're whatever you do that requires, fine motor skills and in a fairly rapid fashion, most of that is learned subconscious memory. And we call some of that, muscle memory or body memory or physical memory. But, like in a sports activity, you can't think about what to do. You just have to do. And if you have to think about it, somebody will leave you in the dust or make you look really silly, or you do something really stupid. And it's just like playing a guitar or a piano or any musical instrument. If you have to think about what you're doing, you're not going to be very good at it. It has to be intuitive. It has to be automatic. All of those things are learned through repetition and discovery. And so the only way you really learn anything is through repetition and discovery. But that's kind of what I build the course around, because it's not how much you remember, it's what you can do. And so as we go along in the course, the basic assignments for the course will be little assignments, little evaluations where you'll have a data set, you'll have a statistics program that we're going to use in the course, and some questions, and you'll answer the questions by analyzing the data set. And that will all culminate in a final evaluation that will include, all of these different statistical processes once again, a new data set and a series of questions that you'll be asked to answer. And so by repetition and by actually interacting with the program itself, the statistical program and data, you will become reasonably aware and somewhat proficient in analyzing simple statistics given a data set. But that's where we're headed, and that's all about mastery learning. It's all about repetition. It's all about discovery. And so it's not a matter of what I tell you. It's a matter of what you do, what you can do. As I said, the schedule, I will post a sort of a final schedule of synchronous meetings in a couple of weeks. Give me a couple of weeks to kind of sort out, all the various schedules that I'm trying to play around with here. And once I get all those sorted out and I get some timelines and dates, then we'll determine when we're going to meet and when we're not going to meet. My preference is not to meet every week. My preference is to meet every couple of weeks, but we need to kind of get into the cycle and see how that plays out, along with fall vacations and all kinds of things going on. Okay. Office hours, well, it's meaningless. My office is my email. And so my office hours are basically when I'm not asleep. And, here's the truth of it. As an old guy, I don't sleep that much. My office hours are when I'm awake, and I'm awake a lot. So if you have a question or you need to get hold of me or whatever, send me an email and I'll respond as quickly as possible. Be sure to let me know, the class and all that sort of stuff, because I won't, after 40 some years of, I don't know how many tens of thousands of students that might add up to, but, I'm good with faces. I'm horrible with names. So just let me know who you are and which class you're in, and, that'll help me kind of figure out what I can help you with. Additional reminders. Some of these are from healthcare management. Some are from the College of Health. They're, sort of some guidance as to how to be successful in their graduate programs. I think everybody figures that out. If you don't, you're not successful. And everybody's life's a little bit different, and everybody figures out the best way to get there. But I'm more than glad to include those. Grading, yeah, there'll be, at least 3 bigger evaluations. There will be a bunch of smaller activity-like evaluations that go along. The only thing that really matters in the end is what you can do with the final evaluation, which will be cumulative and will be at a point in which you have seen and done and know this stuff pretty well and should do pretty well on it. I have no qualms about 13 A's in the class if you do the work and hit the mark. That's my thought process. And so, I don't worry about grading. I just worry about getting you where you need to be, and all you need to be worried about is doing the work that you're asked to do. And if you do that and take the feedback and respond to the feedback, ask questions when you need to, contact me when you need to, you'll be just fine. Questions about the syllabus? Oh, there is a content thing there, and it's sort of in the order we'll do it, but we might juggle with that a little bit. And yes, we will cover all of these things at some level. And you will actually mostly understand them by the time we get to the end. Trust me, it's my crusade to get people to understand what you can know about data. So, any questions about the syllabus or anything I talked about? All right, you'll kind of understand as we go along that I'm a little bit somewhat unfocused to a certain extent, and I don't mind going in different directions if that's where the discussion wants to take us. I'll always get us back to the point eventually. And, you know, if you have strange off-the-wall questions about data or analysis or, you know, life in general, sure, I'll entertain those too. I am a licensed counselor also, so, you know, anything that's, you know, beyond what do I do with the rest of my life, you'll probably have to take up with someone local, but, you know, I'll be glad to put on my counselor's hat when and if you need me. I'm also a licensed mediator, so if we have any disputes in class and then you want me to mediate them, I'll be glad to do that too. You pick up a lot of hats in 40 years. So, okay, we're good? All right, I will be putting up. I think we're gonna kind of kill it here because I'm going to be putting up a couple of videos that I have generated, and I need to edit them a little bit, and they will give you some guidance about the basic concepts that underlie statistics. And then there's also a little silly little video in there that has to do with normality and the idea of the central limits theorem, which is the underlying principle of normality. But when we meet next week, we will put all those pieces in place, and we will look at kind of introduction to JASP. And so if you have not downloaded and installed JASP, give me just a second here. I have 3 monitors here going, so I'm trying to get things to work between them. This is where you will end up if you follow the link on the syllabus page, or in the, I don't know where it's email, but I know it's on syllabus page, to jasp-stats.org. This is the download page. It has JASP for Windows, it has JASP for Mac. If your Mac has an updated operating system, recent operating system, this should download it okay. If it doesn't have a recently updated operating system, then you'll need to download the one that's below here, the earlier version. They both work essentially the same, and so they're, you know, just updates in the later version. But if you can run the later version, then you want to download that. It works a little bit better in PCs. With Windows, there's only one program to download, and it installs like a dream. I don't imagine any of you are working off of a Linux-based machine, but if you are, you know what to do. You are? Well, there's a link here for a Linux-based installation. And this is current as of July. Now, let me give you a little history of JASP. It used to be that when we were trying to teach statistics, we had to use one of a few basic stats programs. SPSS, which is now owned by IBM and has gotten way too expensive to even think about using it. A lot of universities are actually even dropping it because IBM is all about making money. You have R. R requires you to do a lot of programming. You can do stuff on Excel. Excel is very limited unless you can write some macros and do some programming on Excel. It's kind of strange to use. And there's a bunch of other programs, and of course North Carolina's got its own special brand of program they want everybody to use. But JASP was developed, and it's actually out of the University of Luxembourg, I think is where they Luxembourg, yeah, or somewhere in the Netherlands, I don't know. But there's like 400 universities around the world that have come together in like a little bit of a consortium, and it's centered in Europe. And they have developed this free, open source statistical program that sort of mimics SPSS a little bit and mimics other programs a bit. But it is user friendly. It is instructionally friendly. It puts a lot of stuff under the hood inside the black box, so you don't really get caught up in all the minutia of some of these programs. And so it's just a really nice device, and it has become very powerful. The last 2 articles I've written, and which have been in big time assessment and statistical stuff, I use JASP to analyze the data. And so it can do some very powerful stuff, but it's also very user friendly, very easy to work with, very easy to learn, very easy to understand. And so we'll be using JASP for the stats in this course. And so if you have not done so, please go online and download and install JASP onto your computer. We will spend as much time next week as you want to spend introducing it and playing with it, and we'll look at some data, and I'll give you, some data and some instructions about doing some practice stuff in between next week and the next assignment for it. But we'll, it's a good program. So, and it's an absolute requirement for the course. Yeah, there are no other options. I tried supporting 2 or 3 pieces of software, when I first did this course, and found it to be virtually impossible. We spent entire class sessions, talking about different software pieces, SAS and IBM and SPSS and R and whatever. And so eventually Excel occurred to me, we'll just use one. And then I found this one and have it's my go-to stats program now for teaching statistics classes. It's that good. Any questions about that requirement? Have you done it yet? Uh-huh. Okay, a couple heads like this. Most, yeah. Okay, but get it done so that we can begin to move along. Once we get you kind of ingrained into it, you'll find that the pace will quicken rapidly. And it's just a matter of getting sort of ingrained to it. Look at the resource material, the videos I'll be putting up. I hope to get those done and edited and put up tomorrow, but we'll see. There'll be a link on As You Learn. It'll be a YouTube video. I was upgrading my system here. I have this nice 1080 HD camera and better sound equipment and all that. And it occurs to me that maybe the 1080 HD might be too much resolution. We might not have to turn that down, and you might not, it might be scary to look at me in high def for the entire semester. But if you don't turn your resolution down, I may have to turn mine down on this end. So we'll kind of work with that. Thoughts, questions? Yeah, we can have some fun with this. I mean, I think there is some research that talks about, learning and fun. And, if you kind of enjoy the experience you're having, you tend to learn. So we'll keep it as light and as open as we can as we go along. All right. Well, folks, I will see you next week. And I'll get this video up and look for the other videos. I'll send you an email when they come up. I mean, you don't have to stalk around on as you learn looking for them. I'll send you an email when I get the videos posted up. It'll be sometime in the next day or two. Okay. Well, y'all have a good evening, and I will see y'all next week. Give me a yell, email, whatever if you need anything.
All right, thank you.